Well, these are going to be the second part of the notes for section 1.4. And the problems we're going to look at here, some of them are going to have this little number written above the number in the problem. That's called an exponent. Let me remind you what an exponent is. An exponent is a way to represent repeated multiplication. So this is 2 to the 5th power. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, 5 times that is not 10. So that would be addition. Here we're multiplying. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. And 16 times 2 is 32. Okay, so an exponent is repeated multiplication. Just a few vocabulary words here for a minute in case you don't know. When the exponent is a 2, oftentimes we'll say squared for that. So 8 to the second power is often said as 8 squared, which is 8 times 8, or 64. And another one that you might see is when the exponent is a 3. So 5 to the third power, we sometimes will say 5 cubed. So 5 cubed, or 5 to the third, is 5 times itself, 3 times 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 times 5 is 125. So that's the answer to 5 to the third power, or 5 cubed. Okay, so on your homework, for your assignment there, you're going to have negative numbers and exponents. Okay, so it's a little bit tricky and you got to be careful. And this is an easy, sorry, I should say it's often confusing. So here, when the negative is in the parentheses with the exponent on the outside, we are squaring a negative number. We are taking negative 6 to the second power, so that's negative 6 times negative 6. Well, hopefully you'll remember from before, a negative times a negative is a positive, so negative 6 times negative 6 is 36. Okay, here's another one, negative 2 to the third power. Again, the negative's in the parentheses. I'll show you the distinction between this and when the negative's not included with the number in parentheses in just a second. So negative 2 to the third power, or negative 2 cubed. So negative 2, I'll use the dot here, times negative 2. Same thing again as the x, but it's a little nicer when we start having variables, because oftentimes for variables we use the letter x and it gets confusing. So negative 2 times negative 2, well, that's positive 4 times negative 2. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Okay? And so here is one where the negative is not being worked on by the exponent because it's not in parentheses. So again, before, maybe you'll remember the negative here, I said another way to think about that is the opposite. So what is the opposite of 5 to the second power? Okay, well, that's the opposite of 5 times 5. Okay, 5 times 5 is 25, so this is going to be negative 25. This negative sign here comes with it to the answer. So see, the negative doesn't get the exponent because it's not all in parentheses like these two were. And that can be a little bit confusing. Another way to think about this is negative 1 times 5 to the second power. So again, 5 to the second power is 25, and 25 times negative 1 is negative 25. So both ways are fine, but just remember, if it's not in parentheses, then you don't do the exponent on the negative sign. And that's a little confusing. That can be tricky. Okay, so here's one more like that. So negative 4 squared times 3. Okay, so think for a second. Does the negative get squared also? And the answer is no, because it's not in parentheses. So I'm going to just write this out this way. So again, I'm going to use the dot for multiplying this time. 4 squared is 4 times 4 times 3. Okay, so 4 times 4 is 16. So this becomes negative 16. And then you're going to multiply that to 3. Well, 16 times 3 is 48, so negative 16 times 3 is negative 48. Okay, so like we did in section 1.3, we are going to do some stuff with variables here where we do some evaluating. And so I'll give you some letters and what we're going to make them equal to. So evaluate when A equals -3, B equals 2, and C equals -4. Okay? So A, B, like that. Okay, if two letters or two variables are written together, that's multiplication. Okay, so we're going to multiply A and B together. So let's substitute or plug in the numbers for those variables. So A is -3 and B is 2. Okay, so we just times those together. Well, 3 times 2 is 6, and negative times a positive is a negative, so that's -6. Okay, here's one where we got absolute value bars on it, a squared, or a to the second power, times c. Okay, so a is being squared, so we're going to be a little careful here and make sure we put it in parentheses. So a is -3, so we are squaring the negative here because we're squaring all of what a is equal to, which is -3. And we're going to times that to c, which I'll put in parentheses also just to kind of separate it from this multiplication dot there. Okay, -3 squared, that's -3 times itself, or -3 times -3, which is 9 times -4. Okay, 9 times -4 is going to be -36. We still have to do the absolute value of that, don't forget, and the absolute value of -36 is +36. Okay? One more of those, and this one's going to be a little crazy here. So we got a times b to the third power minus a times c. Okay, well let's substitute in and write down what those letters are equal to. So a is -3. Okay, b to the third, so b is 2 to the third minus a -3 times c -4. Oh boy. So if you remember your order of operations, what we need to do first here is this exponent. Okay, 2 to the third power, I'll write that over here, 2 to the third, 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, 2 times 2 times 2 is 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So this is going to be -3 times 8 minus -3 times -4. Oh boy. So before I change the subtraction to addition by the opposite, let me work out the multiplying. Again, our order of operations, we multiply before we subtract. So -3 times 8 is -24. Subtract -3 times 4, so -3 times 4 is 12. So this is -24, take away 12. Okay, now I'm going to add the opposite. So changing that to addition and that to its opposite. So I end up, to finish this, -24 plus -12. So signs are the same. We add them up and we get -36. Okay? And the last thing we're going to do for your assignment, oops, sorry about that. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a sequence or a list of numbers. And you're going to be asked to find the next two numbers. Okay? And my hint is that there's going to be some multiplication here. And later on you're going to learn this is called a geometric sequence. You don't need to know that now. But when you take high school math or maybe even 8th grade math, you will learn more about that. Okay, so here's the list. We got -9. The next number is +45. The next number is -225. And the next number after that is 1,125. And we want to figure out what goes in there and what goes in there, the next two numbers. So like I said, my hint is that there's multiplication happening here, so let's think about that. What times 9 is 45? I always like to work with the first two numbers because they're the smallest. Well, we know 9 times 5 is 45. But negative 9 times positive 5 would be negative 45, and that's not what we have. So we have a positive 45, so we're changing the sign. So what's happening is we're multiplying not just by 5, but by negative 5. Okay, so we do that each time to get the next number. So to get this guy, this is 1,125 times negative 5. Okay, so we got to work that out there. So let's see, 5 times 5, 25. 5 times, put the 2 up here. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. A 1 there. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. 5 times 1 is the 5. And it's multiplying by a negative, so it's negative 5,625. Okay? Again, I'd like you to not use a calculator just yet, okay? Until you get the hang of this. You're going to have to crunch some of these out by hand, and I know that's a pain, but that's what I'd like you to do for now. And then this last one is going to be negative 5,625 times negative 5. We know a negative times a negative is a positive, so let me just work this out here. 5 times 5, 25, 2 up here. 5 times 2, 10, plus 2 is 12. A 1 up there. 5 times 6 is 30, plus 1 is 31, and a 3 here. Oops. 5 times 5 is 25, plus 3 is 28. Okay, so the last number that goes in there is 28,125. Okay, so I know that's a little bit of work there. Just keep your signs straight. You'll also learn later on, if you take more math, this is called an alternating sequence because signs flip around. Negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. Okay, so again, I hope that helps, and if you have any questions at all, please, please, please send me an email. Let me know as soon as you can, because if you're having trouble, we got to get that early so it doesn't get worse later on down the road. Thank you very much.